Until 1889, Chur was merely terminus on a single line from Zurich. Other rail lines in Graubünden had yet to open. Today, the capital actually serves as a hub of famous trains that offer more than just transport. The Bernina Express, for example. The 144-kilometer or 90-mile journey leads through 3 distinct cultural regions on 2 meter-gauge lines of entirely different character. And the end of the line is 2.5 kilometers beyond the border in Italy. Thusis marks the beginning of the Albula line, which in 2008, together with the Bernina, gained recognition as UNESCO World Heritage. This status does not include the modern station erected in the 80s. The Via Mala Gorge is just south of Thusis, away from the railway. Down below, the Hinterrhein River has eroded a path for itself through the hard rock. The Via Mala, the bad road, afforded a perilous passage at best through the gorge in the old days. 90 meters, or 300 feet above the river Albula, rushing towards the Hinterrhein, the railway changes valley sides on the imposing Solis viaduct. The golden age of railway mania in Graubünden lasted 25 years, from 1889 to 1914. Although rather late, this also allowed then state-of-the-art railway engineering to be used. The most important valleys were linked to a bold network of meter-gauge lines, which in itself became a tourist attraction. This daring application of mountain railway technology gained 2 lines of the Rhätische Bahn UNESCO World Heritage recognition in 2008. To those fostering second thoughts, a more striking example in courageous mountain railway engineering than the Landwasser viaduct will be hard to find. This iconic structure has featured in many films and photographs. The Albula line reaches Filisur not far beyond the Landwasser viaduct. By situating the station high above the village, gradients were kept within limits, higher up the valley. When the proposed Skalettebahn into the lower Engadine fell through, a connecting line between Davos and Filisur was opened instead in 1909. Here, a new Allegra multiple unit leads the Davos to Filisur Bernina Express across the mighty Wiesen viaduct. A temporary UNESCO viewing tower was erected beside the station. The UNESCO Heritage List of 2010 featured some 900 objects, including 10 in Switzerland. Recognition does not happen overnight. This one was 2 years in the making. Nor is it confined to just the railway and its more than 100-year-old infrastructure. Towns and scenery also contribute to the Albula Bernina experience and are therefore included. The Roman tower, a watchtower from the 17th century, and thick rendered walls etched with graffiti motifs, evoke Bergune's history as a catering stop for traffic over the pass. In accepting, the UNESCO board said, "In its Albula Bernina surroundings, the Rhätische Bahn represents a pioneering work of modern engineering and construction from the early 20th century, which evolved through a unique interaction between nature, culture, and technology." Nowhere is the character of the Albula line more in evidence than between Bergune and Preda. Here, design and construction literally had to rise to the occasion to maintain a 1 in 29 or 3.5% gradient. In the days of steam traction, this moderate gradient was of paramount importance to ensure adequate capacity of a railway connection intended to open up the entire Engadine region. The most direct route would have yielded a steep 1 in 13 or 7.7% on average, with full exposure to avalanche danger. With engineering previously reserved for international trunk lines like the Gotthard, the builders created an ingenious succession of curves, bridges, and spiral tunnels. On this winding passenger route, passengers must maintain their orientation by following the train's progress on the map or retaining a mental image of the line. Bridges were built with locally mined stone and Portland cement, then a new type of mortar. This method of construction was preferred as being weatherproof and durable. This train is about to enter the last spiral tunnel. In 2007, Stadler Rail received an order for 15 Allegra train sets, the first of which arrived for review and testing in October 2009. As such, some Bernina culture has encroached onto the AC core network that was previously dominated by locomotive-hauled trains. The Allegra combines the advantages of a multiple unit with the power of the most recent locomotives and the availability of AC and DC traction. On the DC-powered Bernina, its 8 traction motors produce a total of 2,400 kilowatts, rising to 2,600 on AC lines. Nothing remains of the workers' barracks of long ago. Preda is now a quiet hamlet at the north portal of the tunnel. The road to La Punt in the Upper Engadine was opened in 1866 and closes each winter. The Albula Pass never gained an importance similar to the Julia further west. 500 meters down below, the railway takes the Albula Tunnel to cross the frontier between two cultural regions. The railway mania of the 19th century fundamentally changed traffic flows across the Alps, which bypassed Graubünden. The writing was on the wall. Tourism was to supplant the dwindling revenues from passing traffic. To achieve that, the most important valleys were to be connected by railway, which got off to a good start when the Landquart-Davos-Bahn opened in 1889. The Albula line ends here. The Bernina Express from Chur already diverted in Samedan towards Pontresina. The Bernina Express from Davos turns around and changes power in St. Moritz. All lines of the core network are fed by 11,000-volt AC, but the Bernina still relies on 1,000-volt DC. This is a remnant from the days before the merger with the Rhätische Bahn in 1942, when the Bernina was a private enterprise linking St. Moritz to Tirano. Sporting events amidst the wonderful Upper Engadine lakes and mountains are organized all year round. The first holidaymakers of the 19th century were mostly British. Among the many events organized, some traditions like polo can be traced to these humble beginnings of tourism. Held in March, the Engadine Ski Marathon is one of the biggest sporting events in Switzerland, with thousands of participants and spectators. The race starts on one of the frozen lakes in Maloja and crosses the temporarily closed Bernina line near Pontresina. A snowplow stands ready to quickly erase the makeshift level crossing. The San Gian Church stands in solitude on a glacier hill near Celerina. The valley floor is already 1,700 meters, or 5,600 feet above sea level. The spire was destroyed by lightning in 1682 and never rebuilt. The Bernina Express takes a shortcut between Sameden and Pontresina. Pontresina station has, similar to St. Moritz, two power systems. In 1908, the Bernina pioneered electric traction to Graubünden with DC motor units fed by hydroelectric power from the power station in Brusio. This inspired the Rhätische Bahn to open its new Engadine line as an electric railway in 1913. However, rapid development in electric traction caused the Rhätische Bahn to opt for state-of-the-art 11,000-volt AC power. The resulting separation in systems has persisted to this day. Track 3 may be switched to either AC or DC power to facilitate the usual exchange of motive power for the Bernina Express from Chur. The AC locomotive makes way for two DC motor units. This routine will become increasingly rare when more Allegra train sets are available. Rail fans already know that this Bernina Express, departing on track 4, came from St. Moritz. The easily graded line to Motorrad affords swift progress to be made along the Bernina Bach. Hotel Motorrad was built in the 19th century at the then foot of the glacier. The Bernina Bahn makes a sweeping detour away from the highway to serve a station stop right in front of the hotel terrace. It has been a popular destination for a day out ever since the opening of this section in 1908. Remnants of medieval horse trails over the pass now serve the enjoyment of cyclists. A stroll to the glacier now takes longer than it once used to. Who or what is to blame remains food for discussion, but records of the glacier's retreat have been kept since 1878. The Engadine part of the railway was aimed more at the tourist than transit. The Montebello curve is a prime example of how a beautiful vista was worked into the scheme when the line was staked out. Passengers seated both left and right in the train are rewarded with a splendid glimpse of the Morteratsch Glacier and the Bernina peaks. The next stop following Bernina Suort, a former horse station along the highway, is Diavolezza. The cable car takes the visitor to 2,978 meters above sea level on the slopes of Muntpers, close to the tallest peaks in Graubünden. The 3,905-meter Piz Palu is easily recognized by its three ridges. The tallest of them all, 4,049-meter Piz Bernina, then Piz Morteratsch and the Pers Glacier in the foreground. In 1930, Eduard Zimmermann, director of the Bernina Bahn at the time, applied for a concession for a Piz Bernina Bahn terminating at 4,018 meters altitude. This record-breaking rack railway was to start in Morteratsch and was to ascend 2,119 meters on a maximum gradient of 1 in 3. The project was too controversial and bound to fail, not in the least with return fares fixed at 50 Swiss francs, which would have been prohibitive in days of economic crisis. More or less as a replacement, the Diavolezza cable car opened in 1956. Tales of enchanting Bernina beauty on a sunny winter's day already circulated in the days of horse transports over the pass. Nobody in those days would have believed in a mountain railway maintaining winter services. Majestic vistas greet the passengers thanks to a minimum of tunneling, but this also exposes the railways to all the rigors of winter.
We are now close to the top of the Bernina Pass. The station Hospicio Bernina is the Rhätische Railway's highest.
On a quiet day, the snow flanger has done its job and returns to Pontresina. Hospicio Bernina is a summit station as well as the highest through station in Europe. The Italian name refers to the old Bernina Hospice Inn nearby that still adorns the highway above the pass. At this point, the highway diverges from the railway to descend into another valley further east.
Es folgt der Bernina Express nach Poschiavo-Pirano Abfahrt 12:00 Uhr.
Hospicio Bernina is home to a passing loop, a shed for the rotary snowplow, and the weather prophet, a nickname bestowed on the man whose judgment determines the employment of snow clearing equipment. On a clear day, he enjoys a splendid view of the Cambrena Glacier across the lake. Gradients are minimal along the banks of Lago Bianco. Meltwater running off the Cambrena Glacier colors the water milky green. Dams at the north and south end reshaped two natural lakes into a single reservoir, feeding the hydroelectric plant at Brusio. The power lines in the background belong to Bernina history, supplying power to the Bernina line from the outset and the Engadine line in later years. The grand engineering of the Albula line required only minor adjustments. Not so with the Bernina, where relocations, corrections, and retrofit line protections abound. In 1934, this part of the line was relocated to the left of your picture to avoid the avalanche-ridden slopes of Pizzlagalp. The Albula and Bernina lines are each 61 kilometers long, but the cost of a Bernina kilometer was only half that of the Albula. Consequently, curves are twice as sharp and gradients twice as steep. With gradients up to 7%, almost 1 in 14, the Bernina ranks among the steepest lines worked by adhesion anywhere. This sign marks the watershed between the Adriatic Sea to the south and the Black Sea to the north. One of the few Bernina locomotives, actually a diesel locomotive with pantograph capable of running electrically on the Bernina, leads the Bernina Express southward. Two of these locomotives enabled a Chur-Tirano Express with change of motive power in Samedan. In 1973, this became the Bernina Express. From 2000, panorama coaches with air conditioning were introduced. Past the southern dam of Lago Bianco, a steep descent begins towards Alp Grüm. The Palu Glacier appears shortly before arrival in Alpgrün. The combination of glacier and a commanding view of the Poschiavo Valley turned Alpgrün into a popular destination almost overnight. The present station building was completed in 1924 and now houses a hotel and a restaurant. The view all the way to the Bergamasca Alps in Italy is breathtaking in any season, and impeded only by bad weather. Running trains all year round has been a test of endurance for more than 100 years. Tribute here is in order not only to the builders, but also to Bernina's staff, who sometimes at lethal sacrifice rose to the occasion to keep trains going. Of course, special equipment has proven indispensable. Seen here in railway publicity action is the snow flanger, introduced in 1936. It widens the trench created by the rotary snowplow to a width of up to 6 meters. This width is not strictly necessary for the trains, but enables them to throw small drifts aside. Mechanized control has long since supplanted the manual operation seen here. In the background, the steam-driven rotary snowplow chases the flanger to throw its spoils clear of the track. Of course, the rotary has to dig a trench first before the flanger can be employed. The steam-driven rotary was in regular service from 1910 to 1967. By then, the overhead catenary had been upgraded sufficiently to operate a new rotary electrically. The mist almost symbolizes the fate of the isolated Poschiavo Valley within Graubünden. Before the railway, the Bernina Pass virtually blocked off La Valle Perduta, the Lost Valley, from the rest of Switzerland, allowing it to retain Italian culture and language. Regular trains are coupled to a snowplow during spells of snow. A train departs from Albula, as seen from below. The famous sharp U-turn immediately after departure changes the direction of travel from south to north and turns back again in the Palu tunnel with the next U-turn. This way, the train snakes its way down cautiously over a succession of loops and bends. The final loop in the Pila Valley just before Cavalia contains a stone arch bridge restored in 2004. Cavalia's secluded tranquility obscures its former role in transit and railway matters. The old inn, later doubling as a station, is now converted to a private dwelling. The field was once occupied by a base camp, teeming with construction workers engaged in building the most difficult section. An electrical substation augmented power supply where trains needed it most. The train proceeds on its twisting descent to Poschiavo. A natural phenomenon is found just 500 meters from Cavalia. Locals refer to these as giant's pots. The holes were created by violently swirling glacier water containing stones. Cavalia merely forms a break in an enormous slope. From Albula, the line descends 398 meters down to Cavalia, and from there another 679 meters down to Poschiavo. That's 1,077 meters of altitude in just 16.5 kilometers. The railway shops on the right are more than a century old. The Bernina briefly pauses in the main town of the Poschiavo Valley. The railway changes to a tramway in San Antonio. Using existing infrastructure then helped to save initial costs. What appeared a practical solution during construction must now be secured by modern means to avoid conflicts with road traffic. In good old British tradition, the train takes to the correct side of the road through Le Prese, forcing oncoming road traffic to do the same. Le Prese evolved in the 19th century from a group of holiday villas on the northern banks of Lake Poschiavo. Motor Unit 56 cautiously leads the train. Delivered in 1990, it may well be the last motive unit specifically ordered for the Bernina line. Train and road appear to have parted, but in reality the railway proceeds along the old highway, now reserved for pedestrians. This section is level, a rarity on a line where nearly half is on gradients of 5 to 7%. Miralago sits on a prehistoric mountain slide that eventually created Lake Poschiavo. The lake also serves as a reservoir for the power plant in Brusio. From here, almost without interruption, the line resumes its steep descent towards the Italian border. A satellite view shows fresh scars of a rock slide above the loop of Brusio. The second ground for acceptance by UNESCO's World Heritage Board states, in addition, the railway represents a unique example of a line harmoniously integrated into an Alpine setting. The harmonious relation between railway and its surroundings was not obtained by chance, but through visionary planning and a fortunate combination of technical innovation and environmental care. Words like these automatically lead to one particular Bernina trademark, the exposed loop at Brusio. For a while, the UNESCO Tower provided visitors with an entirely new perspective. Would they have grasped the brilliance of this solution and its sheer necessity? There was no other way to gain altitude. An abundance of loose rock on surrounding slopes made tunneling impossible. In December 2008, the approach, not the loop itself, was damaged by falling rock to such an extent that the railway had to be rebuilt on a dam. One image to capture the point stated by UNESCO: recent technical innovation, smart track planning, and cleanly produced energy to conquer steep gradients. Four hours out of Chur, the Bernina Express rolls through the streets of Tirano in Italy, greeted by vineyards and the Madonna di Tirano. The first stone of this basilica was laid in the early 16th century. From here, it's just 1 kilometer to the Rhätische Bahn terminus and the adjoining station of the Italian State Railways. Three valleys, 2 countries, 1 train. A Bernina Railway and Bernina Express might never have materialized for the sake of connecting the Poschiavo Valley. But hydroenergy, raw Alpine beauty, tourism, and connections with 2 national rail networks have created a wonderful day out on its own. The Bernina Express.